Welcome to Le Weekend, your essential roundup of French news on culture, business, the economy, and current affairs. We bring you a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus an additional focus feature blending reportage and cultural context. You'll find a seamless recap of the week's most important headlines without losing any content from our previous daily format, perfect for those who want to catch up in just one episode. Le Weekend is designed to keep you informed and engaged with a lighter touch at the end. Let's dive in. These are the headlines on Monday, May 25th. A heat dome settled over Europe, scorching the UK, France and Spain. The French capital of Paris on Saturday hit 31.9 degrees centigrade, its highest temperature of the year. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu will hold a meeting Thursday with key ministers to go over government preparations for the heat wave, as reported by Le Monde. Atlantic, the French leader of the heat pump industry, is now under Japanese-American ownership by Paloma Rheem. Financial details were not disclosed, although sources place the valuation at 3 billion euros, as reported by Les Echos. The 79th Cannes Film Festival concluded with the Palme d'Or awarded to Christian Mangu for his film Fjord. The Grand Prix went to Andrei Siagistev for Minotaur, while the jury prize was awarded to Valeska Brisbach for The Dream Adventure, as reported by Le Figaro. A major immigration study showed great blending is underway in France, but inequalities persist. The second edition of a large-scale sociological survey by the National Institute for Demographic Studies revealed a rapid convergence in the cultural and social practices of immigrants and their descendants with those of the wider population. However, ongoing difficulties in access to employment and housing confirm the experience of systemic discrimination and racism, as reported by Le Monde. The headlines on Tuesday, May 26th. President Macron said auto group Stellantis will invest over 1 billion euros to make electric vehicles in eastern France. The president made the announcement at a meeting urging businesses to speed up the electrification of transport as the country seeks to phase out planet heating oil, gas and coal by 2050, as reported by Les Echos. The spectacular Louvre robbery will be brought to the screen by filmmaker Romain Gavras. The adaptation rights to the investigative journalist's book Membas sur le Louvre, The Louvre Heist, released this week, have been sold by the publisher to the production studios Iconoclast for the feature film and Misfits for the documentary series. Release dates have not yet been announced, as reported by France Info. The French Mint launched the Marianne, a pure gold investment coin. Sales of the Marianne and e-Marianne, the digital version, began Tuesday online for the most loyal customers of its collectible medals and coins and will be open to the general public starting June 16th, as reported by Le Monde. The headlines on Wednesday, May 27th. Former Lafarge cement chiefs were released pending Syria terrorism financing appeal. The former CEO of French cement firm Lafarge, Bruno Lafont, and his right-hand man at the company, Christian Hérault, are to be released from prison under judicial supervision pending their appeal over convictions handed down in April for financing terrorism in Syria, as reported by RFI. presidential candidate Gabriel Attal hardened his migration line, with President Macron's camp split over the 2027 presidential race. Renaissance leader Attal has put immigration at the heart of his newly launched presidential campaign, calling for France to admit fewer people while giving priority to those coming to work, as reported by RFI. The headlines on Thursday, May 28th. The National Assembly, the lower house of Parliament, unanimously voted to repeal the Black Code, 170 years after the abolition of slavery. This set of 17th and 18th century texts served to regulate slavery in the French colonies. It had never formally been repealed despite the abolition of slavery in 1848 and the Taubira law recognizing the slave trade and slavery as crimes against humanity in 2001, as reported by Radio France. Patients with severe obesity will no longer pay for their treatment entirely out of pocket in France. From mid-June, Eli Lilly's Mounjaro and Novo Nordisk's Wegovy, two drugs indicated for the treatment of obesity and available in France since autumn 2024, should be partially reimbursed by the National Health Insurance System, as reported by Le Figaro. France is betting on a desirable electric future thanks to major private funding. President Emmanuel Macron has signed a pact with hundreds of companies as part of an ambitious drive to double the share of domestically produced electricity in France's energy mix by 2030, from 30 to 60%, as reported by RFI. The headlines on Friday, May 29th. Rating agency Standard & Poor's S&P maintained France's sovereign rating at A+, with a stable outlook. Economy Minister Roland Lescure said he acknowledged S&P's decision, adding that the government remains fully committed to continuing the reduction of the public deficit and debt, as reported by Les Echos. The historic heatwave saw more than 1,000 heat records broken in 6 days. Tuesday was the hottest day ever recorded for the month of May, while locally several maximum temperature records were broken, including Saint-Brieuc, Dinard, Besançon, and Biarritz, as reported by Le Figaro. In Paris, the Bastille Day fireworks display will be moved to the 13th in tribute to the victims of the Nice attack. As in previous years, the fireworks display will be launched from the Eiffel Tower, and the military parade will still take place on Tuesday the 14th, the original date, as reported by France Info. Amidst the legal and media turmoil following the opening of several rape investigations, popular singer and actor Patrick Bruel has cancelled all his concerts scheduled in Paris and at festivals this summer in France and abroad, as reported by France 24. You are listening to Le Weekend. And now that you're all caught up with the news from the past week, it's time for our bonus story. Today we look at why the abolition of slavery has made the news this week in France. This week, something happened in Paris that would have been unthinkable to the enslaved men, women, and children who built France's colonial empire. The French National Assembly, France's lower house of parliament, voted unanimously, 254 votes to 0, to formally repeal the Code Noir, the Black Code, a 341-year-old royal decree that until this week was technically still on the books. France abolished slavery in 1848, but the law that governed how enslaved people could be worked, beaten, sold, even killed, the legal architecture of human bondage across an entire empire, was never formally struck from French law. Not in 1848, not after World War II, not during the student revolutions of 1968, not at any point in the century and 3/4 between abolition and this vote this week. This Code Noir just sat there quietly, like a stain that no one wanted to look at too closely. Now that it's gone, the question worth looking at is why Code Noir survived for so long and what it tells us about France, Europe, and about how the world accounts for the violence of colonialism, or even more, how it doesn't. To understand the weight of this moment, we have to look at what the document actually was. In March 1685, King Louis XIV promulgated the Code Noir, drafted largely by his chief minister Colbert, the same man who reorganized French commerce and the French Navy. The Code Noir was a 60-article decree that created a comprehensive legal framework for slavery across France's Caribbean colonies: Martinique, Guadeloupe, Saint-Domingue, present-day Haiti, and which later extended to French Guiana, Louisiana, and the Indian Ocean islands of Réunion and Mauritius. The document did not shy from detail. Article 44, for example, declared enslaved people movable property, meaning they could be bought, sold, mortgaged, and inherited like furniture. The code defined the condition of slavery as passing through the mother, not the father, ensuring that children born to enslaved women, regardless of the father's status, remained enslaved. It required enslaved people to be baptized as Catholics, not as a kindness but as a tool of control, forced conversion as civilizational justification. The code contained provisions that appeared protective on the surface. Masters were required to feed and clothe those they enslaved, to care for the sick and elderly, not to separate families in sales. But, as a French philosopher was cited as saying, despite those provisions, the issue is what they obscured. Those gestures of paternalism existed alongside codified torture, mutilation, and execution. The protections were real only insofar as masters chose to observe them. The punishments were absolute. France transported approximately 1.4 million Africans across the Atlantic in chains, the third largest slave trade of any European power behind Portugal and Britain. In the colonies governed by Code Noir, the work was so brutal, primarily cutting sugarcane and feeding open-fire boiling houses, that deaths among enslaved workers outpaced births. The colonies required constant human replenishment from Africa simply to maintain the labor force. The bill to repeal Code Noir was introduced by a lawmaker from Guadeloupe, one of France's Caribbean overseas departments and one of the territories that the Black Code originally governed. He described the repeal as a way of restoring our ancestors, restoring our humanity. The debate in the National Assembly at times was emotional. A lawmaker descended from enslaved people in Martinique broke down in tears before his colleagues. He spoke of his great-grandmother and of her grandfather Ambroise, born in Africa, reduced to slavery under the identification number 336. "We are not descendants of slaves," he said. We are descendants of human beings, born free, then reduced to the worst, reduced to slavery. The vote passed 254 votes to 0, and almost immediately the hard questions began. The repeal's sponsor said the measure will have no direct effect. Whether it helps France address racism and inequality in its overseas territories, he said, remains to be seen. Florence Alexis, a slavery scholar and daughter of Haitian writer Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, was more pointed. It is easy for the French authorities and for President Macron to do this, she said, because it commits them to nothing. Frédéric Réjean, a scientific advisor to France's forthcoming Trocadéro Memorial for the Victims of Slavery, pointed to the lived conditions in France's overseas departments as the real indictment. In Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana, Réunion, all territories once governed by Code Noir and now legally part of France, residents face much higher unemployment, lower education levels, elevated rates of poverty and single-parent households, and what Réjean describes as inequalities that have reproduced themselves over time. Dieudonné Boutrin, an activist from Martinique descended from enslaved people, welcomed the vote, but called it overdue and insufficient. Now we need to go beyond the symbolic, he said, urging a real reparations program, including funding for education, historical transmission, and tackling systemic racism. To provide context to these reactions, we need to follow the history a little further back. The colony of Saint-Domingue, governed under the Code Noir, where enslaved people made up to 80 to 90% of the population, became the site of the only successful slave revolution in history. In 1804, Haiti declared independence, becoming the first black republic in the world and the first country in the Western Hemisphere to permanently abolish slavery. France did not respond with a celebration of human freedom. France sent warships to Port-au-Prince harbor and threatened force and reinstitute slavery unless Haiti agreed to pay an indemnity, compensation to French slaveholders for the property they had lost when the enslaved population freed itself. In 1825, France extracted an indemnity of 150 million francs from Haiti in exchange for diplomatic recognition. Haiti was forced to take out loans from French banks to make the first payments. The final payment on that independence debt was not made until 1947, over a century of national revenue, siphoned away to compensate the very people who had enslaved and brutalized Haitians rather than the other way around. France abolished slavery in 1848 in its remaining colonies, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Réunion, and French Guiana, and proceeded to financially compensate former slaveholders for their losses. No compensation was granted to those who had been enslaved themselves. This is the context in which this week's vote landed. France abstained just 2 months ago when the United Nations General Assembly voted to call the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity and to call for reparations. France did not vote yes. President Macron, the week of the repeal vote, said publicly that the question of reparations should be addressed. He announced no specific measures. France's High Court, Cour de Cassation, rejected a reparations claim from groups in Martinique, ruling that no individual plaintiff could prove they had personally suffered damage from crimes their ancestors endured. The groups involved have said they will take the case to the European Court of Human Rights. The Code Noir being struck from the books is not nothing, but the law's repeal unanimous in an afternoon, with no financial obligation, no structural change, no reparations framework, and no binding plan for the territories still shaped by the inequality that the code created, does raise the question that historians, activists, and the descendants of the enslaved keep asking. When a country is willing to say symbolically, this was wrong, but not yet willing to ask what that wrong cost and who is still paying, the question is not answered by a unanimous vote. It is perhaps only just beginning to be asked out loud. Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for the main headlines in France. Catch our weekly roundup every weekend wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.